Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Aiken. I am the Media Relations Director for the Department of Health and Environmental Control. I want to welcome all of y'all in today and appreciate your time on this Wednesday to be with us as we discuss really the third in a series of educational briefings about PFAS in South Carolina, specifically today, the agency's surface water strategies. So our format, as usual, is we'll have our presenters give their presentations. That's going to be Myra Reese, Environmental Affairs Director, Jennifer Hughes, who is the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Water, and Dr. Matt Bauman, who's an aquatic scientist with DHEC. We're going to put those titles for everyone in the chat side, so you'll have those as they're speaking. But without further ado today, I want to turn things over to Myra Reese, Environmental Affairs Director. Myra?
Yes, Ron, thank you, and welcome everyone. And I also just want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. Let me say that we also just really appreciate the support of our media partners in helping us with our goal of being a trusted source of information for communities across the state who might be at risk of exposure to PFAS chemicals, either through the environment or through consumer products. And I think, as we have stated in our first two briefings, that tackling PFAS chemicals in our environment continues to be one of the most complex, challenging issues that states across the country are tackling today. And it's really a global issue. South Carolina's approach since day one has been and continues to be driven by science and data. And we really feel like that the data is really going to lay out the story for us in South Carolina. It's going to help us better understand how these chemicals are finding their way into our environment and how they find their way to areas that our citizens may be exposed to. The data also is going to drive our actions. It will drive EPA actions and inform EPA actions, and at the end of the day, citizen actions in reducing their risk of exposure and protection of public health protection. So today, as Ron mentioned, our focus really is on our waterways and our surface water. The first two were focused on drinking water. So today, I'm going to ask Jennifer to go ahead and make some comments, and then we look forward to hearing from Dr. Matt Bauman, who is really taking the lead on our strategy for collecting ambient surface water data collection. Jennifer?
Thank you, Myra. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Jennifer Hughes. I serve as Chief of the Bureau of Water for DHEC. In the first two briefings, we shared information regarding PFAS and drinking water. Today, we are sharing with you information gathered from collecting ambient surface water samples from across the state. Several years ago, DHEC began developing strategies that would evaluate the fate and transport of PFAS in the environment in South Carolina. We know that to address PFAS, that we have to have sound science and data to make informed decisions. As we have stated, addressing PFAS is a very complex and challenging. Knowing and understanding that, we developed our strategies in a very methodical and intentional manner to address those complexities. The first priority, which has the most direct impact, was to look at drinking water. In the first two briefings, we shared with you data from sampling public community water systems, and we also shared with you EPA's process for establishing maximum contaminant levels. Here's an update on the EPA front. As you know, on March 14th of this year, EPA announced the proposed national primary drinking water regulations for 6 PFAS compounds. It is important to note the proposed regulation does not require any actions until it is finalized. EPA says they anticipate finalizing the regulation by the end of 2023. Once finalized, there is typically a 3-year period before the new standards go into effect. EPA is requesting public comment on the proposed regulations. The public comment period is now open following the proposed rule being published in the Federal Register on March the 29th. Comments must be submitted during the public comment period that ends on May the 30th. EPA held informational general overview webinar of the proposed regulation on March the 16th, and then another informational webinar geared towards the water utilities and drinking water professionals on March the 29th. EPA will also be holding a public hearing on May the 4th, where members of the public can register to attend and provide verbal comments to EPA on the rule proposal. Registration is required to attend the public hearing, and the last day to register to speak is April the 28th. The information I just provided about EPA can be found on their web link, and we're at put that link in the chat feature of this media briefing. Again, EPA's proposed regulation is to establish maximum contaminant levels for 6 PFAS compounds in drinking water. As a reminder, our drinking water strategy is still underway, and we are in phase 2 and continue to sample drinking water sources. The data being collected and shared is assisting in determining impacts to drinking water sources and steps that will have to be taken to comply with drinking water standards once finalized by the EPA. Knowing the complexity of addressing PFAS in the environment, our strategies are looking at PFAS in a holistic and a multifaceted manner. So while we continue to study, learn, and address PFAS in regards to drinking water, we are also devoting efforts and resources to understand the prevalence of PFAS in our ambient surface water. It is important to note that some of the larger community water systems withdraw water from surface water, like our rivers and lakes, and the data you're about to hear is very important information that can be used by our drinking water system. The main point of today's briefing is to share with you information from our ambient surface water strategy, and for that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Matt Bauman, who is an environmental science in the Bureau of Water's Water Quality Division, and he is leading the efforts with the ambient surface water strategy. Dr. Bauman?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Bauman, and I am an environmental scientist or aquatic scientist in the Division of Water Quality here in the Bureau of Water, and I am the lead on the ambient surface water PFAS project. As Jennifer noted, the ambient surface water PFAS project is one component of the Bureau's comprehensive plan to determine PFAS prevalence in the South Carolina environment. Surface water is part of the state's hydrologic system and includes any body of water above ground. This includes streams, rivers, lakes and reservoirs, wetlands, and our coastal waters. All data, surface water data that we have released today can be found at the link on this slide. On the top of this webpage, there are downloadable links for our ambient surface water strategy, the quality assurance project plan, a description of the analytes that we are testing for in the project, as well as a downloadable Excel file.
Your PowerPoint touch.
Shown on here.
Cheers.
Apologize for that. So all surface water data that we have released today can be found at the link on this slide. On the top of the web page, there are downloadable links for our surface water strategy, our quality assurance project plan, a list of the analytes that we are testing for in this project, as well as a downloadable Excel file. And pins on the map are interactive and can help the user orient themselves to the data in the Excel file. PFAS do not occur naturally. They are a broad class of several thousand synthetic fluorinated chemicals. Production of these chemicals began in the 1940s. They have the unique properties to both repel oil and water. As such, they are commonly used in everyday appliances, non-stick cookware, food packaging, stain-resistant fabrics, metal plating, firefighting foams, cosmetics, industrial surfactants, to name a few. PFAS and PFOA were the two most widely used. They are now phased out of use. Because these chemicals end up in so many commercial products, they end up in virtually all of our waste streams. And in April of 2021, the Bureau released a strategy to assess the impact that these waste streams might have on surface waters within the state. The objective of this strategy was to determine how widespread PFAS are in ambient surface waters and related media within the state. In the strategy, we identified a number of priority watersheds in each major river basin within the state. They are roughly equally distributed among all the river basins to ensure equal representation. And by selecting watersheds, we have produced a scalable strategy. These 48 watersheds help guide sampling plan development. In July of 2022, we initiated that project. The surface water component involves quarterly sampling of more than 100 streams, rivers, lakes, reservoirs, and coastal sites. We are testing for 26 unique PFAS analytes. This project is not static. In January 2023, we considered the first 2 quarters of data and have initiated a number of additional sampling events to target our certain regions of interest and to fill in data gaps that we didn't fully address with the initial sampling plan. There's also a tissue component to this. All the tissue data we plan to release near the end of the project. We are testing PFAS in freshwater fish at 20 locations, we're testing for PFAS in oysters at 24 coastal sites, and we're looking at PFAS in blue crabs at approximately 15 coastal sites. The map on this screen identifies those 107 routine quarterly sites. Our approximately 40 adaptive management sites are not pictured yet. Where we currently sit, quarter 1, 2, and 3 are complete. Quarter 4 is ongoing. What is our surface water data telling us? PFAS has been detected at nearly all surface water sites, though the concentrations are highly variable. Our larger rivers provide a basin-wide aggregate view of our watershed condition, and I will note that there is a great deal of variation in PFAS distributions among our major rivers. Our smaller streams and creeks are also highly variable, and we believe that they will be useful in providing diagnostic information. The PFAS chemical EPA is proposing to regulate drinking water are commonly observed in surface waters, albeit at varying concentrations. This is an important project objective here. We want to provide these data to better inform potential impact to drinking water sources. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Myra, did you have any other comments, or would you rather wait until the end?
Let's go ahead and wait to the end and go to questions.
Sounds great. All right. We had a couple pre-submitted questions. However, they fell within the scope of what was asked about in the briefing. So if you have a question for any of our panelists today, go ahead and raise your virtual hand, and I will call on you in the order in which you appear. In light of being fair to everyone, I'll come back for follow-up questions after I get to everybody's so that they have an opportunity to ask a first question initially. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Damien, go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Yes, I wanted to ask Dr. Baumann, you talked about high variability in the PFAS that you're observing in the watershed. Is there, at this point, any sort of trend in where our highest concentrations are located?
Thanks, Damien, for that question. Yeah, that's a critically important question, and it's one that we do aim to address with the design of the project. It's a bit too soon to draw conclusions on seasonality or towards what our PFAS contributors might be. As I did note in the introduction, the larger rivers, for example, the Broad, the Saluda, the PD, and the Congaree, should give us an idea on the condition of these large basins as a whole. The second half of 2022 provided us an opportunity to capture data under a variety of flow conditions. Summer was pretty low flow. It got very, very low in early fall, and then in mid-November it started raining and the river conditions came up. What we're kind of seeing in our major river basins is a concentrating mechanism under lower flow conditions and a dilution effect under higher flow conditions. At this point, it's kind of difficult to say anything certain about our smaller streams. They tend to be a bit flashier with rainfall, and runoff characteristics can vary widely depending on land uses within the watersheds. The PFAS signatures in these smaller watersheds are also highly variable and related to activities in these watersheds that may emit PFAS. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Damien. Does anybody else have a question?
Ron, this is Myra. There is a question in the chat.
Oh, great.
What analytical method is DHEC using for surface water and tissue? Could you answer that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Steve.
Yeah, I can answer that one. We are using a liquid chromatography mass spec with isotope dilution. It is a proprietary method by our contract lab, gel down in West Ashley.
Damien, your hand threw up there for a second. Do you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm sorry, it's completely slipping my mind. If you can go to somebody else with their hands up, and
I'm
I'll
happy
raise
to
my
do that.
hand.
No problem. Hang tight. Melissa, go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you. You all talked about how these regulations are, of course, for drinking water, and this surface water is part of a holistic approach. Can you talk about how specifically surface water, because I know that these effects from PFAS are often from ingestion, not just, jumping in the river. But can you talk about how the surface water is related to our drinking water? What sources overlap there? What that overlap is?
Hi, this is Jennifer again, and wanted to point out that with surface water, some of our larger drinking water systems, they have intakes or withdrawal water from surface water. So from a drinking water perspective, there's a lot of interest in the data we're seeing in our ambient surface water project, because some drinking water sources come from our lake streams and reservoirs.
Do you have anything else, Melissa?
Nope, great, thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your question. Does anybody else have any questions today for our team?
Yeah.
Damien, anything come back to you?
Yes, wanted to ask about the sort of feedback that you might be hearing working and communicating with some of our local utility companies, and speaking with the ones here in the Lakelands region. A lot of them talk about sort of the insufficiency of available technologies to really reach the levels that the proposed limits suggest. Sort of, what are you hearing on a broader scale from local and regional utilities regarding these proposed limits?
This is Doug Kynard. We've had having conversations with a lot of our utilities ever since the proposed MCL came out, and they have expressed concern about the difficulty to treat at that low level and the availability of the treatment material they'll need to remove PFAS from their treatment plant. So it's definitely of concern, and we've got a little bit of time before it becomes final, and we plan to continue to have those discussions with our water utilities and try to figure out how best to address this once the MCL becomes final.
Thank you for that question. We have a couple. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Can I chime right in with this, Ron, real quick? Doug did a great job answering that question. But also, as we mentioned, whereas the EPA continues their rulemaking process, there's that input piece where they want public comments about the proposed regulation. And we know from the drinking water utilities that they are being very engaged with EPA and sharing a lot of their concerns, whether it's from the technology point of view, from the cost associated with implementing it. They are being very engaged and giving feedback to EPA during this public comment period. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Doug, I know we have a couple questions in the chat, but I first want to get to Sammy. Did you have your hand up there a second ago? Sammy still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yeah, I had a question. You said you're testing for fish, crabs, and some other organism. Do you know when that might be out? And can you share any preliminary findings on what you're seeing?
Thanks, Sammy. This is Matt. We are still in the process of compiling a lot of this data yet. Our data analysis of that data set is still pretty limited at this point. I think our plan here is to release all of that data towards the end of the project. As I said, we're still compiling a lot of the data, and our analysis is pretty preliminary at this point.
It is, do you know roughly at the end of the project, will that be at the end of the year, or do you know when that will be?
Yeah, the end of the project wraps up in June, so we expect to release that data sometime in early to midsummer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. I want to get a couple of chat questions in. Steve Rosato asked, I think we already actually covered that one. Jason Teig, how much of an impact on the low country, and where would the impacts be for surface water PFAS?
Yeah, so this is Matt again. We do have a number of sites that run the low country from Charleston all the way down to Beaufort. All the data from July through December 2022 is on the website, and you can use the interactive map and kind of click around to see where higher concentrations might be. But yes, all of the data released today can be found in the downloadable Excel file. I would recommend checking the Salkehatchie and the Santee River Basin tabs in the Excel file, and that'll kind of orient you to what we're seeing in the low country.
Thank you for that question. Also a question in the chat from James Pollard. What are you finding in freshwater fish, oysters, and blue crabs? What risk might high levels of PFAS there pose to both the ecosystem and the consumers?
So this is Matt again. As I mentioned to Sammy, we are still in the data gathering phase for our tissue component. EPA does have draft criteria out there, and I think that would probably be a good place to check to at least get some idea as to what EPA thinks might be concentrations in tissue that might pose human health risks. But yeah, we're not ready to talk about our data at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Damien, go ahead, sir.
Nope, sorry if my hand was raised. Nothing here.
No worries. Melissa, you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, one last thing. You guys talked about that variety, and I was looking at that interactive map, the two Ashley River locations themselves. One of them shows for some substance between 1 to 2 as that number, the other one ranging into double digits. So that's a pretty big difference. And I know you started to talk about preliminary work from the EPA. Are there certain numbers that DHEC currently has, like a self-imposed threshold as you're going through these studies, or is it truly just to get a gauge of where the numbers are at the moment, or are there certain numbers that raise your eyebrows?
I can take a first stab at it. No, at this point, we don't have a threshold for what we consider, alarming versus safe. This is strictly a statewide survey to figure out what our condition is that we think will help better inform the regulation making process.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Melissa. Does anybody else have any questions?
So, Ron, let me kind of add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Is that, this data is really going to speak to us if we see some areas of the state, some of our waterways have elevated levels. Is there something that's going on there that's very localized? And that's when we really drill down to what are some potential sources, what are some ways that we can reduce those levels of these chemicals in our waterways, which ultimately could lead to drinking water, to the drinking water, whether it's surface water, as Jennifer mentioned, or, that we have some of these chemicals that end up in groundwater that can impact private wells in South Carolina. So that's what's so challenging about this issue, and that we have to take a step back and look at the big picture, make sure that we're looking at all of our environmental media. We're looking, at activities like land application of biosolids. We're looking at dischargers. We're just looking at the many ways that these chemicals can find their way to our environment and ultimately lead to exposure to citizens in South Carolina. And as we can expect EPA to continue, you know, they started with the greatest risk of exposure from an environmental perspective is through drinking water. So the Safe Drinking Water Act was the focus. Now the Clean Water Act. They will continue and look at some of the hazardous waste, CERCLA laws, the RCRA laws, eventually looking at the Clean Air Act. So this, as we have mentioned before, you know, this is an issue that has taken many, many years to result in the issue that we have before us. And it's going to be multidimensional as far as the environmental actions, protection actions that will need to be done at the federal level and the state level. And ultimately what citizens can do individually, you know, paying attention to the consumer products that you purchase and how you can be introduced to these chemicals. We can give you some information on, you know, how you can determine what the levels are if you receive your water from public drinking water system, or if you have a private well and you're concerned about where your private well is located. Is it located near what would be maybe a potential source of these chemicals? We can share that information and work with you and give you information on steps that you can take to reduce those levels. So today was really about, you know, sharing this effort that we have going on, you know, collecting data of the state's waterways. But we're going to continue on many additional briefings and try to have a laser focus on every step we take.
Thank you so much, Myra. I don't have any other questions in either the chat box or hands up. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all of our environmental affairs scientists and panelists and administrators today for continuing this conversation with the South Carolina media and the public about PFAS as it's ongoing. This particular recording will be up on our website later on this afternoon, as are the previous web briefings that we have done, again, to serve as educational resources for our media partners. If you have any questions off of these or earlier briefings, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will put you in touch with whomever you need to speak with and get you the information that you need as we continue to monitor this in South Carolina. We rely on you to communicate that message and to explain what it means for South Carolinians everywhere. Again, thank you everyone for your time, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Myra. Thank you, team.